This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 28th of October 2021, and I am 2J.
I am 2.
And I am GK. In case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, Uhuru Raila delay Nairobi campaigns. In the Standard, RUTO allies go for top Uhuru men. In the Star, Musalia buys poll cars, Sakaja takes lead role. And in the People Daily, WAIGURU faces arrest over graft. How quick was that?
My goodness, there could be a headline of people buying cars.
That one we should toss actually almost immediately.
No consideration.
The Star had no news today. Let's kick us off.
All right, today we will present a memo to Deputy President William Ruto. Dr. Sir, your UDA house has been infiltrated by spies, and they're all Kikuyus. In fact, we want to hypothesize that WAIGURU is a double agent planted therein by the deep state.
Wow.
But before we tell you more, allow us to tell you a story. It's a story of a young spy known as Anna Strong. She had to have the name Anne.
How convenient.
Absolutely. And she was hired by George Washington to spy on the British colonial government during the American Revolution. She went by the code name Agent 355. Now, Anna belonged to a group of spies called the Long Island Spy Ring that spied on British Army operations and reported back to George Washington. The man in charge of the Long Island Spy Ring was a guy called Abraham Woodhull, a neighbor of hers. Now, Anna's role was to signal the spy ring's movements and relay information to Woodhull, who lived next door. She did this by hanging laundry on her clothesline in pre-arranged configurations. If she hung up a black blouse, it meant that the spy ring was in town. When she hung 6 handkerchiefs on the line, Woodhull knew that a team of 6 spies from the spy ring had arrived to see him. She was so effective, the British did not suspect a thing. The flow of intelligence was smooth. In fact, if it was not for Anna hanging blouses and handkerchiefs, America would not have won independence in 1776. What's the point of my story here? If WAIGURU is a spy, her work is to hang laundry in current for the state. If William Ruto is gossiping, she's meant to hang a yellow blouse. If Ruto is planning a takeover on government before August next year, WAIGURU's work is to hang 6 yellow and green handkerchiefs and shukas. She is basically in UDA as a Trojan horse that will kill it from within. And we say this because if William Ruto has attempted to impeach WAIGURU twice in 8 years, why would you run to him now?
Good question. If
William Ruto has repeatedly called for the prosecution of WAIGURU, why would she think he'd protect her now? If your enemy has called for your destruction time and again, would you run to them and ask that they accommodate you? Absolutely zero. WAIGURU is definitely working for someone, just like all Kikuyus in Hasura Nation are.
Everyone has an owner.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Fantastic.
So we've really spent quite a bit of time this week demystifying the certainty of the Gemma vote. In case you didn't know, this is the new tyranny of numbers. Our premise is that William Ruto will not win the presidency simply because he needs too much of the Kikuyu vote to win. But we've also said that if Central Kenya do not see one of their own on the ballot, they will not board the flight to 2022. But I want to present a bit of a wild card. Is it possible that we are heading towards a grand coalition government in 2022? I say this because, in my view, William Ruto will not let government be formed without him. So come 2022, when he's on the wrong side of the win, will he force Raila into the negotiating table to create a position for himself? Let me explain my thoughts. The creeping reality is that 2022 is shaking up to be a highly charged election. And we only need to look at history to remind ourselves of what happens when Kenyans take elections too seriously. And because of this, I foresee a contested election where each candidate will go to court claiming that they are the winner. but the courts can only fix so much.
Yeah.
So in order to keep the peace and avoid another 2007, the only solution will be for Baba and Ruto to engage in a second handshake and form Grand Coalition 2.0. In 2008, the National Accord and Reconciliation Act was legislation by necessity.
Correct.
It dictated as much.
Yeah.
Section 8 specifically laid out the situations in which NARA would cease to apply, simply because it was a function as a temporary bandage to save Kenya from itself.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just where we're headed.
Yeah.
Now, I might be exaggerating, but there is a high likelihood that a loss for either candidate may take us over the edge. It's all hustlers versus dynasties until it costs us lives and the stability of our economy.
Correct.
So in hindsight, maybe it's clear to see the brilliance behind handshake number 1.
Yeah.
Uhuru Kenyatta engineered it as a ceasefire option to suspend all bad behavior just until a later time.
Yeah.
So next year, the handshake doctrine might acquire a life of its own and give us the position of Prime Minister.
Yes.
While Raila lives out his transitional presidency.
Yes.
And should Mr. Ruto keep his end of this new handshake bargain, 2027 might be handed to him on a silver platter. My question is he humble enough to take that deal? Oh no.
Can hazard a guess there and say no. So again, this week, the Fifth Estate, we came down hard on the people of the mountain, as the panel talked about some of the illusions surrounding the next election. One that stood out the most to me was the illusion that because there will be no Gama candidate, this will mean low voter turnout in 2022. Now, I want to add to this debate and suggest that maybe the opposite might be happening. Normally, when citizens are voting in a new regime, we can expect that voter turnout will be high.
Yeah.
When the public has an obvious object of aggression or a polarizing issue, turnout is also high.
Right.
So using the logic of succession elections, such as the one we had in 2013, we can expect that because we will be voting in a new regime in 2022, turnout will also be high.
Yeah.
Turnout will also be driven up because Ruto himself is the object of aggression. He's so polarizing that when people come out on August 9th, it will be a vote for Ruto or against Ruto. It may not even matter who the other candidates are. Now, just like 2013 had a high turnout because the ICC was the object of aggression and the common enemy, I feel like Ruto might be that person. More so, I'm persuaded that the people of the mountain are being cheeky. They're demonstrating voter apathy early may just be a strategy. So in political theory, it is the madman theory. It dates back to when Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that sometimes it is a very wise thing to simulate madness. Now, the Kikuyu nation is simulating madness, and is simulating madness because, as was rightly pointed out, there appears to be no candidate that directly represents them. But on this, I submit that if Uhuru has not picked a successor or handed over the mantle, it is because he is still the leader of this silent majority that resides in central Kenya. And they will follow him wherever he goes, wholesale.
Yes.
The Kikuyu candidate may not be called Maina, Mwangi or Kimani on the ballot, but there is definitely a Gama candidate.
Right.
Now, a story is told about how a man would go on his walk every day and he would give a particular homeless man some money. He decided to make this a habit.
Yeah.
One day, when he went to reach for his wallet, he found that he didn't have any cash on him.
Right.
He apologized, but the homeless man became aggravated and upset.
Yeah.
The man had conditioned the homeless man to receive money every time he passed him. So the one time the homeless man didn't receive it, he went wild. Now, the people of the mountain are like this homeless man, conditioned to be kingmakers and to hold the tyranny of numbers in all elections.
Yes.
But this time, it is not as straightforward. So will they continue to just expect manna from heaven, or will they change tact soon? Some food for thought there.
Yep.
Fantastic.
So who are we giving our winning headline, given that we tossed the star?
Toss them all.
Toss them
All of
all.
them.
Poverty of thought and imagination.
All of them.
There we go. All of them are going no winning headlines today.
And now our final thought. It is inspired by a book entitled $1 Billion Loser, The Epic Rise and Spectacular Fall of Newman and WeWork by Reeves Weidman.
So I think sometimes it pays off to question the fundamentals of life. And the company WeWork did just that by questioning the very construct of an office. So before WeWork disrupted the industry with shared workspaces, offices were part of the established norm. So this service WeWork provides, it's just a fancy name for a shared office.
Yeah.
But after the recession in 2008, this idea really flourished. WeWork then took the appeal of co-working spaces and turned it into a viable solution for businesses of all kinds. So leasing office space, especially in major cities such as New York or San Francisco, is difficult and expensive. So this company, WeWork, leases space from landlords in cities at one price, remodels it into a co-working space with desks and private offices, and then rents it out to small businesses and entrepreneurs at a premium. On top of it, WeWork provides operational services, so not just catering or a receptionist, but they also give you financial, legal, IT, and all the other stuff that make it so difficult to start and run a business. And so this full service appealed to everyone, small startups, but also these billion-dollar companies, all by allowing businesses to reduce their capital input, decrease their operational complexity, and outsource the risks to just one service provider.
Yeah.
And this promise helped WeWork grow into this real estate monster that disrupted the commercial real estate sector by making it very flexible. So at its height, WeWork employed around 12,000 people and occupied more than 20 million square feet of office space.
Wow.
In 2019, it became Manhattan's largest private tenant and London's second biggest tenant just after the government. It was valued at nearly $47 billion and it was crowned as one of the fastest growing, most valuable startups in recent history. But soon, it all came crashing down. And most of this was attributed to the CEO's overblown vision for the company. Adam Neumann, the CEO, was known to focus on energy and spirituality as more relevant metrics of potential than things like revenue and losses.
I love it.
And I guess that's how it became this billion-dollar loser, as the title says. But then again, I think 2M is going to convince us that maybe he wasn't a loser after all.
Absolutely. And you know what? When I sit back and take in what this guy lost, I say I will not criticize him. I mean, how do you criticize someone who is still worth $1.8 billion? In any case, if he built up his empire then and lost it, it means he can do it again.
Oh, man.
Now, this is a guy who started out as a college dropout with no commercial real estate experience and a business track record of having 2 launched failed startups. The first was a company that sold women's shoes with a collapsible heel.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, he was thinking.
Yeah.
The second company was a line of baby clothes called crawlers that featured pants with knee pads sewn into the legs.
Makes sense.
That was genius, right?
They're always on their knees. So.
Yeah, it's genius.
But no takers.
No takers. Now, when the financial crisis hit in 2008, Neumann had burned through an investment from his grandmother of nearly $100,000 and scrambled to hire a lawyer to renew his visa to stay in the States. To help pay rent, he let another company sublet space in the Crawler's Brooklyn office space. And this is exactly what gave him the idea to begin WeWork. In fact, during the post-crash recession, Neumann had the foresight to bet landlords would need tenants, and the legions of underemployed professionals would pay for an appealing alternative to working from Starbucks while they got back on their feet. Long story short, if this man began from crisis, all it's needed from him is to rise again, is probably another crisis.
He has coronavirus to deal with.
COVID-19, of course.
Absolutely.
I like that. So reading this book, The $1 Billion Loser, was really interesting. It's very well written, like easy to read. And they point out a number of things. I just want to say that Adam Neumann is Israeli.
Yeah.
And Israeli is known as sort of the startup nation of the world. In fact, I think there's a book called Startup Nation.
Yeah.
So he already had sort of that going for him.
Yeah.
A lot of why they say the valuation reached that $47 billion was to do with his personality, selling this vision of community and, more than just work, the way they live, the way they go to school, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. in the co-working spaces, you have your coffee, your tea, your wine, your beer. So someone like 2M would really thrive in such an environment. They didn't frown upon the things that you would find in a traditional workspace that you couldn't do, right? But there are things that the authors sort of point out that many investors didn't look at. And one is that valuations are not a hard science. Basically, a valuation of a company varies very wildly with what numbers you decide to put in. And they can give you a false sort of sense of security. And they give an example of Uber and what happened to Uber. Uber was valued at $17 billion at some point. But then an NYU professor pointed out that it was actually inflated by a factor of 25. So according to the professor, his analysis presumed that Uber's total addressable market was a $100 billion taxi limousine market. However, Uber took their valuation or their big addressable market to be every single car on the road, which is a market that theoretically could be worth 1.3 trillion. And the idea here is that at that time, these startups, the Airbnbs, the Ubers and all that, were doing fundraising in this sort of blue sky thinking way. You know, you aim for the stars and the sky. You aim for the highest limit. And so when Airbnb advisors were trying to put their pitch deck together, they said, don't use 30 million as your aspiration, use 30 billion. That's what people really want to see. And Adam Newman had this thing. If you watch YouTube videos, he goes out there and he really pitches the hell out of, you know, WeWork. And he tells you why he's worth that $47 billion. Now, the thing that I think investors should look out for, or even you and I, is called the greater fool theory in finance. So it's possible to make money even if something is overvalued, for as long as there's a greater fool out there willing to pay more. And I think for WeWork, the greater fool in this case was SoftBank, who kept bankrolling these guys. Even up until Adam Newman leaving, they were still bankrolling this company.
Blindly.
Exactly. So find a greater fool for your business. And then the other thing they talk about is something called blitzscaling. And it's a counterintuitive business strategy. So basically it involves purposefully and intentionally doing things that don't make traditional business sense. So the things that you would worry about, risk, costs, all that stuff, the idea that WeWork was actually just a real estate company with no real tech outlay should have worried people, but they really just ignored it. And the goal was this lightning growth. They were just looking to amass as much as they could. So a Harvard professor tells us that there are 3 things that you should look out for, and it's called wobbling. So if there's a wobble in any of these 3 areas, authenticity, logic, and empathy, you should worry. Now, we're told that WeWork employees started to wobble or feel fearful about their company when they watched another company start to fall. And this was Theranos, the rise and fall of Theranos.
Elizabeth Holmes.
Exactly. So they saw that the founder was charismatic. Information was not really trickling down the company stratosphere, or rather the layers
channels,
of and so they were left to think, okay, somebody else must know what's going on. And then Theranos never actually had like a certified doctor on board, and neither did Adam Newman. He never had a real estate guru on his side telling him, you know, this is the way forward and this isn't. And so it started to wobble from from the very beginning. So I want to end with that.
Wait, one fun fact. I feel like another evidence of the wobble. He started a preschool. Did you guys read about this? We Grow for toddlers. So that's under the age of like 5 years old. And it was $40,000 a year. That's 4 million shillings
and
a
it was
year.
Run by his wife.
For your child to play. To play with mud and letters.
You'd be surprised there's Kenyans who would pay crazy amounts to take their under 5s to school.
Socialization.
Right? So sort of profitless prosperity. I don't know what you guys think of it. You can let us know in the comments. Kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel. We had no winning headline, but you can find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Prime Free to Air, and Startime.